In most value add deals, residents wait months before they see any change in the property. Today, we're going to be talking about our 28-day transformation plan and why it's been such a pivotal part of our overall process and our differentiation, and where we actually found the shortfall in the industry. We're going to be talking a little bit about the backstory and some of the results that we're getting to be able to come in very quickly within the first 4 weeks. We call it our 28-day full out transformation plan. We're going to be going over that and the impact it makes in the communities that we buy moving forward. John, it's great to be here with you.
So good to be here, Mark. I remember when you first sent this idea to me, right? It was really in the early days. I mean, I think within the first few weeks of forming, and we were looking for things we could do to give us an edge. And I remember having a little heartburn. It's like 30 days. Can you do all that in 30 days? And as one of our core values, right, is that operational excellence, but also that speed of execution. And so coming in quickly and having a high impact on day one. And what's amazing is, the first deal we did, we really executed on it. And so it was a good example sometimes of setting really big goals and, sort of building a plan around it, right, to meet that goal. Sort of that juxtaposition around a wimpy goal gets you wimpy results. So really excited to dive in and really kind of give the listener here not only a view of the 28-day transformation, but a real live exercise where we're going to walk through one of our deals that we just took down and walk you through the actual steps that we're doing along the way to deliver exceptional value to our residents, which in turn blows up our investor returns, gives them great exceptional returns, because if the residents are happy, the investors are
Yeah,
happy.
for sure. And I think to start the conversation here, John, it's really good for the listeners to have some context on what we saw when we started looking around at the larger multifamily communities that we were potentially looking to purchase. So this is as we were forming our business plan, because you and I, John, we know that order to be successful in business, it makes it a whole lot easier if you can have a differentiating factor, like what actually makes you different. And so we knew we had high standards. We knew we had success in building companies as well, like the operational excellence in running companies overall. Like we had that advantage. We also had the advantage as well of being in real estate and selling thousands of properties and working with thousands of investors. And then the other side is like the presentation and how to actually maximize how to, we'll say, get the most amount of money for a real estate deal, being on the residential side.
Yeah.
But as we started looking in the background, and for the listeners out there in the multifamily space, when we started looking and touring the assets, we realized something really interesting. We realized that as you were starting to get up in the commercial space, there wasn't that same attention to detail on how the model suite and the leasing center and just the overall grounds, how it was presented. With our background, John, being in the residential side, we like, especially when you're starting to get up into the higher end homes, when we're presenting and staging a property, like everything is meticulous, because when buyers come in, they have, like, you got one shot to make a great first impression. But
Yeah.
what we found when we were looking at the we'll call it the apartment space, and especially being the commercial and the B class space, so between 1980 and 2010. So it's more working class. So it's not like the 3,000 plus a month type of communities where you're paying $3,000 a month for an apartment. You're paying somewhere between like 1,400 to 2,200 a month. So it's more working class. We call it B class space. We
Yeah.
found that as we were starting to look around, there was no staging. The leasing office was generally very messy. They did not spend time to actually renovate and make it a true wow first impression. And some of the feedback we got was, well, it's not going to help us get any more rent, or it's very different than when people are looking to rent. It's very different compared to people looking to buy. Like, oh, it's just they're just looking for X amount of rent and that's it. And that was like a big aha for us, John,
Yeah.
looking at that. And so maybe share a little bit about what you saw as we were walking around as well.
Well, interestingly enough, when you're touring these rent comps, right, and you're walking into these leasing centers, and you nailed it. I mean, half the time there were papers spread around everywhere. There was no collateral or material the resident could take with them. We would ask, hey, do you have a pricing sheet? Well, no, not really. And it was almost like there was like a disdain in a sense for the customer, right? The resident. It was sort of like, well, they got to rent somewhere. They'll, and our rents are good. They're just going to rent this property, right? And what I've learned in business is sometimes, a 2 or 3% improvement is the difference between a good result and a great result, right? And so if we can maximize the probability that a resident touring our property will sign a lease, right? And we have fewer residents that we have to screen, it's a less of a drag on operations and things of that nature, right? And so, yeah, I mean, you nailed it coming from the residential space, that idea of curb appeal and, understanding that, as somebody who's driven buyers around and, help them select their, maybe forever home or certainly a home where they're planning to raise their family, you get that sense that it's often when they see the property from 100 yards away, and I know
Mm.
myself personally, my wife and I were looking and we were like on our 8th or 10th property when we finally saw the home we're currently in 12 years later. And I just rounded the corner. When I saw the exterior, it was this beautiful brick exterior, wooded lot, just great. And I was like, this is it. I was like, unless the house is a disaster, this is the house. I just
Mm.
knew it. Right. And I don't think a resident is any different, right? And why would we think they're different? Human psychology is human psychology. And just because they're
Yeah.
paying rent versus a mortgage, they want to feel that sense of pride when they come
Yeah.
home at the end of the day, right? And
Yeah.
you know, I'm a big believer in life that how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So if I'm a resident and I walk into a very messy leasing center and nobody comes and greets me at the front door and I have to like poke around or stick my head around or into offices, hey, are you the leasing manager? Which is an
Yeah.
experience we have more often than you'd believe,
Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
literally have to go find the person. And it's like, so if I'm that resident, whether I'm consciously or just subconsciously, I'm registering that, right? And I'm saying, like, so what's going to happen if I need my, garbage disposal replaced or my water heater breaks, right? Are they going to be organized and efficient and handle my issues quickly? But yeah, the experience is such a big part of really any business, right? The difference between a great retail versus an okay retail or restaurant, right? It's in the small details, and
Mm.
getting those small details right is what keeps people coming back and having them refer their friends and family.
100,
So
100%. And just one
uh,
more point before we get in, because I know we're going to spin into this, but the other thing was like the sales training side of it, like who you met, who you met
yeah,
when you first walked in. It didn't seem like there was a lot of, we'll say, a time taken to hire the right person, somebody that creates like an instant bond with the residents when they come in. It seemed like there was no sort of, we'll say, attention put on that. And so, to kind of tie it all together, the emotions of selecting their home, this is where, John, you said it, is that our thesis at Faris Capital Partners is that the same emotions apply whether you're buying a $500,000 home or if you are going to make a decision if you're going to live somewhere. Even though you're not buying it, you're making the commitment, a 1 year commitment to live somewhere in your life. And so when you have that kind of standard to it, all of a sudden it changes your approach on how you're going to deliver to that resident when you have that same bar, whether it's somebody buying or somebody leasing, the same emotions apply. And this is where we really believe, with our residential backgrounds, it gives us a major competitive advantage out there in the marketplace, where generally they're commercial owners that are more, we'll say, numbers driven versus like the soft skill sets, from sales training to the overall feel when somebody walks in, the presentation and the online marketing side, where we believe that by doing that, and our numbers are telling us that this is accurate as well, the numbers will be a natural byproduct of doing all the right things. Now, I'm not talking about blowing up and doing like crazy upgrades above and beyond the asset class. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about some of the stuff that does not cost a lot of money. It's just some attention to detail.
that's right. That's it. Yeah, I mean, I think it really, what is the 28-day transformation? What is really the purpose? It's just to make meaningful, visible changes so fast that residents and the prospects immediately can feel the sense that this place is a little bit different, right? That's really what we're trying to accomplish. And one of the things that you'll learn in this business, if you're newer to this, is that apartment buildings on average in a normal market tend to trade every 5 to 7 years. And so, for example, at the property we're going to dive into a little bit and give you kind of the detail around our 28-day transformation, we have residents that have been there for over 25 years. So they've seen 2 or 3 ownership groups, maybe more in that period of time. And maybe what they've experienced in the past is a new owner comes in, not a lot changes, but the rent goes up. And, so we felt it and we feel it on the first day. Like people come in to the leasing center, they're not shy and they'll say, "Hey, we saw the sign change. What's going on? Our rent's going to go up." It's the first question they ask, right? And so while they're in our office asking that question, on that first day, we're out there rebranding the sign, we're cutting back trees, we're starting paint, we're improving the property. So that conversation very quickly shifts into, here's all the things we're going to be doing to improve your living situation, right? And so that question immediately dissolves. And so it is truly, I would say, our biggest differentiating factor. In terms of execution, I think we have many others. Our investor experience, we focus a lot of time and attention on, is one as well. But just that ability to add value before we ask for value, I think is just
Mm,
such a critical
yeah.
component to the success of our assets.
Well, John, this goes back to Robert Cialdini's book Influence, and one of the principles he talks about there is reciprocity.
Yeah.
Reciprocity, and we're big on that. Like we're big value guys, you and I. Like we didn't run a discount brokerage before. We run high, like first class service, and so we really believe the more you give, the more you get, the more value you give, the higher you can get. And that's the beauty in these markets, is that there's no rent control. So if you deliver excellent value to residents, and our thesis again is that we can get premium rents if you deliver premium service, even to somebody that's in the working class. Like these are beautiful people that are in, they're nurses and firefighters and police officers and like hardworking blue collar that are just beautiful. They're beautiful people, and they appreciate a community where they feel safe. They appreciate a community where the owner actually comes in and delivers. So we don't come in and say, yeah, we're going to be doing all these things, and then like 6 months later nothing's done, or maybe one or two things. We're coming in and saying, yeah, we just did this and this, and they're like, holy smokes. And you're
Yeah.
right, like we've had that from residents where they've come back after, like we've had like 4 owners before, we've never seen anybody move this fast before, and they're excited.
Yeah, and it's amazing too, because the reason we've gotten that feedback, Mark, is because we actually show up at the property, right? You and I personally, our asset manager, she's always on property. I mean, gosh, if not quarterly, usually every 1 to 2 months, right? And when we're on property, we're giving out our business cards with our direct contact information to residents, right? And we've only had 1 or 2 directly reach out, but it's just that thing that I think a lot of operators, they buy a deal in another state. It's all to them a spreadsheet and a pro forma, and their property manager reports back with financials, and that's usually it, right? And so our own property manager, we've currently aligned ourselves with Asset Living. We've gotten feedback from our regional that she rarely, if ever, sees the owner actually on the property, right? So in and of itself, that's just something we do. As close to the ground as we can get is where we're going to get the best information. That's talking with residents, asking them what they like, what they don't like. And that's really what informed this 28-day transformation, right? We had a really great vision for it, the first asset we took down, but then we learned from it what added the most impact, which created the most value, what got the most excitement from our residents, right? And then we just doubled down on those things. So really the principles around it, right? We want to lead with safety, pride of place. I mentioned that earlier, but a resident who's renting versus buying wants that same feeling of pride when they come home at the end of the day. And then really top right service, right? Just making sure that our leasing centers are open. Going back to touring assets, Mark, I mean, how many times have we showed up to an asset at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and found a sign that just says out of office? If you need something,
Oh
call
yeah.
the cell phone number,
Yeah.
right? And that's if we're lucky. We've actually showed up at some where there's no signage at all. And then you walk around and you find a little poster board somewhere, kind of on a stand in front of the thing saying, scan this QR code to access an apartment. And it's just kind of like, that's not a great feeling, right? And so by doing all this and by front loading these high impact projects that residents will notice that day one, right? The outcome is faster leasing, resident retention, higher renewals, and most importantly, cash flow, right? Earlier
Mhm.
cash flow, right? Because we're getting those renewals. In fact, we've had, in a sense, not necessarily an issue, but it's sort of a funny thing where on one of our properties, we've done such a good job with the transformation that when we've raised rents to try to free up some units for renovation, the residents have accepted it, like a 10% rental increase. And we weren't necessarily trying to jack up their rent 10%. We wanted to create a vacancy, but they liked the living accommodations we provided so much they accepted. So it's a good problem to have, right? But it just goes to show you that by doing this stuff quickly and making that impact, and showing that we're actually investing money back into this deal, they're gonna renew, they're gonna stay longer, and that retention is so critical because the biggest deal killer is the constant turnover. You know, every time we turn over an apartment, we're spending $1,000, right, on make ready. You know, we have to go out and spend marketing dollars to attract new residents. We have the time factor of, you know, touring that resident and approving that resident and getting them moved in, and so that's downtime. That unit is not producing income during that period of time. And so keeping that renewal and those, you know, occupancy numbers up are critical to the success of these deals.
Right on. And kind of last point there, if we were to kind of look at high level, is to synchronize the construction and all the renos. So there takes a there's a we'll say it's like when you're going away for vacation. It's like you got to do a bunch of things before you leave. And so by having a tight timeline like the 28 days, it forces our team to get very organized within that time frame. We know we got a deadline, and so why that's really great is because we're going to be spending the money on doing these renovations anyways. And when you do it very quickly, you get a, we'll say, outsized return on the impact of those renovations when you do it all at once versus like you slowly do it over a year or two. And we've seen that with a lot of operators. They're slowly improving it. And a lot of times they have the cash in their account to do it.
Yep.
They're just not moving quick on it. And so there's by having that importance and like by saying, here's our standard every time, no matter how busy we are, um, you know, that forces that we'll say all that manpower into getting it done very quickly. And then that's where if you do it within the 4 weeks, the 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 beauty with that is as we start to do the renewals, all of a sudden there's a case there for and a reason to increase the rents. And we're getting outsized returns on this and higher than projected rents because we're actually adding value. We're giving first to the community and doing the things that they're actually seeing value in versus just telling them we're about to do something.
Yeah. And even from an internal, like just back at Faris Capital Partners, right? We take down multiple assets a year. And so, you know, part of this is getting it done quickly so we can move on to the next deal, right? And we're not like, oh, wait a minute, did we finish the roof over here? 'Cause we got this things going on over here. And, you know, things can start falling through the cracks when not done fast, right? And so, you know, aligning ourselves with the best vendors. And over the course of the past few years, we've developed some strong relationships with a handful of key vendors that can move quickly. They know exactly what our standards are. And so, just from an operational standpoint, it allows us to move on to that next deal a little more quickly, knowing that this one is solved and taken care of and settled, right?
Well, John, and because we have such a high bar with our vendors, they understand like we have deadlines, we have timelines, and we're different than most operators.
Yeah.
We would have given them months to execute and finish that. They would have taken that. But
Yeah.
because we have such tight timelines, we vetted the best people and the ones that we're working with understand it. And they definitely would put us ahead of somebody else because of the size of units that we do, but also because we have that high standard and we hold people always rise to the standard you set for them.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There was an interesting study, Mark. I believe it was in the United Kingdom, but they basically were looking at, you know, project quality based on timelines. And so they would give a group, different groups of people, similar assignments, right? It was within the government. And some groups would have like a month and a half to complete an assignment, some would have weeks, same assignment. And the shorter the time period, the better the output that was created.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, when you set a tight deadline and you said we got to get this done, it was like the work quality, the intensity, everything increased. Where you give somebody a month and a half, they're like, well, we'll get to it. And, you know, then starts to happen is, oh, some other project came up, I got to run down here and take care of this over this other deal, and then they miss 2 or 3 days and it just starts all falling apart, right?
Kind of like if the you want something done, give it to a busy person.
That's right.
Place for
Exactly
that,
it.
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sort of like Georgetown, right? We just closed on Faris Residences Georgetown. It was actually actually a bit of a bigger lift. We actually, and the main factor was we're replacing all of the roofs. And so we got to get that done first before we do certain things like painting and other things that, replacing roofs creates a lot of dirt, dust, and debris. And so we obviously want to paint and then have it impacted by that work. So that work has begun. We're remodeling the leasing center, which is actually a unit. So it's a unit that's been operating as a leasing center. So it's been effectively a down unit, since it's the building was built. But we're going to go in and renovate that unit exactly like one of our renovated units. So all new furniture, very welcoming. All the way down to little details. We have doggy treats and little water bowls. And, of course, we have our wow fridge that if you're a listener of a podcast, you've heard of before, but it's just a fridge that is stocked with, great beverages and snacks for the kiddos that are on the tours. But just this really welcoming environment. So even a resident that is just coming in to pay their rent or to, inquire about a maintenance repair, is welcome into a nice, comfortable environment that feels like part of their community, and they can grab a water or a sparkling water or whatever they need. We're also doing new exterior lighting throughout. Earlier we mentioned safety. What we found touring assets is that often, we try to go at night when we can, and you see how dark it is. And, if you're coming home from work, I mean, gosh, in the South, it gets dark about 6 o'clock. I know up North, it's earlier than that, but, most people aren't off work till 6:30, and they come home and it's dark and gloomy lighting. It just doesn't have a great feeling. So putting all new bright, fresh lighting throughout. We're painting all the exterior doors and shutters. There was actually some, columns that were in front of the townhome units that just had a dated look. So we're fixing those up, modernizing those. We're actually really excited about this, but this property had no amenities to speak of. So we're adding a dog park, a playground, and then a grilling station with a pergola. We update all the signage throughout, so a modern, clean look. One thing we've learned is that the unit number is actually off the door and to the side, just give it a bit more of a luxury feel. So we're doing that. And then we're resurfacing, striping all of the parking areas. It was just not in great shape. And it just goes back to, all those details matter. So that's a big project. And then the cultural rollout, which is almost like as important as everything we just mentioned, but that genuine love of people. So we brought in new property managers. Our team has a say in those final hires that our property manager makes. So we meet the top candidates and approve those. We've learned you cannot teach somebody to be have that genuine love of people. That's something you either have or you don't. And so we make sure we have somebody who has that same kind of those same set of core values we have. And then we install our 3 guarantees, right? So the happy in your home, where you can move out if you're not satisfied in the first 30 days, in your corner, where a major life event disrupts your ability to pay rent or you need to move for some reason outside of your control. We'll work with you on that. And then our speedy service guarantee, where we get maintenance requests done very quickly. So it's all about that same excellence that we want our investors feel. We want our residents to feel that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so just for context, this was a 67 unit, including the leasing, which could be used as an actual unit. So 67 units just outside of Charleston, so in Georgetown. So that this deal we've recently closed, and this is all stuff that we're on right now and doing and getting close to getting completed as well. So this is real. This isn't just something that we talk about. This is something that we execute. And it's one of those things that I've realized that every time you do one, you get better at it because you learn. It's like, we'll do an after action review after. It's like, okay, what did we learn? And you just keep getting better each and every time. And it's interesting. You get faster at getting things done as well. So, John, why don't you take us through kind of the 28-day roadmap and the sequence of it? Let's maybe kind of jump through that quickly to kind of wrap up the conversation here so that the listeners have a little better context of the 28-day plan and the sequence of it.
Yeah, so well before we close, right, we're already working where we can on getting any permits that are needed, getting our vendors mobilized, all of our materials ordered, staged, and ready. So, knowing the closing's occurring, we're already, manufacturing the sign, right? We're already ordering supplies for our unit renovations or roof replacement, building out our resident communication plan. So the idea is that the day we close, we are on site and work has already begun. So in week 1 at Faris Residences Georgetown, we started trimming back all the trees. The property, it's in South Carolina, has beautiful palm trees throughout, but they had not been properly maintained. So just trimming those back made such a difference. And then we look for things like safety. Are there any tree limbs hanging over the roofs that if a storm came through could create an opportunity for some damage, right? That could impact a resident. So we take care of all those things. We generally do all the lighting. So at Faris Residences, that was first week, we replaced all the lighting. We pressure washed all of the buildings. We're replacing fascia, as well as some of the gutters that were damaged, and starting some plumbing work. So we had just some, through our due diligence, we realized that there was some, lack of maintenance when it came to the plumbing. So they weren't doing the jet outs and clean outs that they should have been doing. So all that started in week one. And then really it was actually starting the first day of week two, we got the new signage fully installed. In week two, it's really when we talk about turning on the leasing engine, right? So our leasing unit started renovations in that first week. We largely have completed that by week three. We are just now waiting on some materials to complete the kitchen, but we get the model leasing center completely furnished and designed and looking good. And then in week three, we've started all of the amenities work. So the dog park is in motion, the grilling station with the pergola and game station is in motion, and playground is being installed. So that's kind of week three. We also, immediately are talking to as many residents as we can. Part of that communication plan is signage, emails that go out, letting them know, sort of like pardon our dust, that you'll see some work going on. But we invite residents into the leasing center to meet with us and just learn more about the work we're doing and why we're doing it and how it will benefit them. And, in kind of that final week, right, it's just, getting the roofing completely finalized. And, then we'll have the painting that needs to get completed after those roofs are replaced, completed. So the idea is that really by week 5 or 6, we're doing our first resident event where we're welcoming everybody in. We bring a food truck, generally Kona Ice. We do some giveaways, but our primary goal is to meet all the residents and just talk to them, introduce ourselves, let them know who we are. A lot of that's happened, but that's when you and I usually are out and have that opportunity on our side. So it is fast and furious, but we've got it all mapped out, and it's all about just getting that execution done in the time that we've committed to. So we're proud to report we'll be largely complete. The only issue with this particular property is the roofs. And if we have bad weather, there might be some delays there, but largely we'll have everything complete within that first 30 days. So really exciting. And we're already getting so much positive feedback from our residents. In fact, the city council has already reached out, and some of the local leaders in the community have reached out. Just so excited on the impact we're having in this community.
Yeah, no, 100%. The other thing too is like we're really big on culture. We
Yeah,
with the Jack Welch says that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So
that's right.
our goal is to go in and change the culture of the community. And so for us, one of the starting points is to actually install our mission and our core values right there in the leasing office and to talk about it. And I was just on with actually one of our regionals, and we were going through the core values and talking about it, and even coming up with legend stories for each of the core values that we have that they can share with the other team members, and to really breathe life into the overall mission. So our mission with all of our communities is to go full out for residents and provide the best living experience in the world. And so this is something that we talk about, and we want to create that community for that. And then we have these 5 core values of genuine love of people, making wise choices, first class service, operational excellence, and speed of execution. These are 5 core values. And so we actually have that up on a plaque on the wall. But the difference that we have compared to that's different than other operators is that we actually talk about it, and we actually make decisions based on that as well. And so this is something that we live and breathe on an ongoing basis. And that's part of the goal, is to change the culture in the community in the spot that we're buying as fast as possible. And by doing that upfront, getting clear on that, it gives us a major strategic advantage.
That's right. If you'd like to learn more about what we're up to here at Faris Capital Partners, or just engage with us a little bit more on investing in apartments in the US, go to fulloutinvesting.com. That's fulloutinvesting.com. We have a sample deal deck on there that you can, scan through to learn more about our approach beyond the 28-day transformation, and book in the time to connect if you'd like to learn more.
Awesome. Thanks, John, for that. And thank you for listening to the show, everyone. If you liked it, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel or share it with another high net worth investor that you think will benefit from it. We love and believe in you guys. Keep dreaming and investing big.